Hi, friends. Imagine, if you will, a horrible, evil place where everything from the teeny tiny little bugs to the giant trees literally want to kill you. Here, trees don't speak Vietnamese because they're too busy chewing your squad mates. Now, imagine just how horrible a world like that would be. Then double it and give it to the next guy, and that guy would have Catachan. Catachan is one of the deadliest, if not the deadliest worlds in the entire setting. No, I'm just kidding. Catachan doesn't accept maybes. Catachan is the deadliest death world in the entire setting. On Catachan, literally everything is out to kill you. Every plant is poisonous, which would explain why every creature is carnivorous. Which makes literally no sense from an ecological perspective, but in the wise words of Pancreas No Work, this is Warhammer and science is for losers. And when I say everything wants to kill you, I don't mean how people describe Australia. I mean everything literally consciously wants to kill you. The planet is so dangerous that even Space Marines try their hardest and never end up on Catachan. They literally can't even make permanent buildings on this horrible planet since hostile vines will crush structures and poisons in the soil will dissolve building materials. This means they can't have any Lee sandwiches on Catachan, proving it truly is a horrible, horrible hellhole. But of all these horrible, evil things on the horrible, evil world of Catachan, it's a real testament to the Jungle Fighters that perhaps the most imposing thing on the world very well might be the Catachan Viper between the average guardsman's Herculean thighs. Or, whatever the female equivalent of that might be, because being a badass on Catachan has a very Anakin mindset. The Catachan Jungle Fighters are some of the most, if not the most, badass regiments in the entire Imperium, and are some of the most, if not the most, badass dudes in the entire setting. Since Catachan's such a hell world, it virtually has no valuable resources, so its only export is guardsmen in exchange for whatever resources the Catachan need. And the Jungle Fighters are so damn good, this might be the best deal in the last 40,000 years. The Imperium gets some of the coolest dudes ever, and the Catachan get a fun little vacation. The Catachan Jungle Fighters are literally an entire army of hardened badass action heroes who love nothing more than jungles and fighting. Well, actually, they're more like two armies when you account for the legendary, ultra mega badass one man army, Sly Marbo! But I already talked about him and the other badass characters of Catachan like Strachan, Nork, and Harker here, so be sure to watch that after this video. But anyways, due to the horrific conditions of Catachan, it's said that 50% of their people don't survive infancy, and that of those people, 50% of them don't survive to the age of 10. But that remaining 25% are some hardcore badass 10-year-olds because they have the insane feat of surviving 10 years on Catachan. Basically, from birth, Catachan are taught survival skills, combat, and probably how to properly flex. These madmen are literally taught to shoot before they can walk, which is really cool because this drawing of a baby shooting a tree that I made finally makes sense. And that gun baby thing isn't a joke. That's literal actual lore from the First Guard Codex. Or if you want to read it, you can find it in this old white dwarf. For the latter, thank you, Warhammer Vault. After 6 months, you're finally useful to me. And Catachan simply don't stop being badasses at age 10, even though at age 10 they're already deadlier than most other humans. As they continually face the horrors of their home world, their skills are honed until they can truly become a Catachan Jungle Fighter. Since only the most fearsome and resilient guardsmen are able to survive on their death world, Catachan are some of the best, if not the best, guardsmen in the Imperial Guard. Catachan Jungle Fighters' primary strength, other than their literal strength, is their skills in guerrilla fighting. The Catachan often can't get heavy armor support on their homeworld due to the dense jungles and vicious wildlife, so the Catachan have become experts in close quarters infantry fighting due to the low visibility of thick jungle, experts in stealth operations since they need to learn how to evade the fauna of Catachan, and laying booby traps cause, well, everyone likes boobies. Anyways, Catachan typically operate in tight-knit squads meant to look out for each other in whatever hostile environment they find themselves in. Also, please read this funny excerpt from the Codex, I really enjoyed it. From that though, Catachan squads are very close and fully trust their squad mates to cover their backs. In fact, it's somewhat common for Catachan squads to be made up of family members to tighten their bond. Catachan infantry squads are adept in sneaking around dense terrain, laying deadly traps, and coordinating ambushes. Through careful stealth, cunning ambushes, and imposing musculature, the Catachan are able to take down enemies far bigger and scarier than themselves. But sometimes you just gotta hunker down and fight something head on, and the Catachan sure as hell ain't slouches on that front. For being mere humans, Catachan are surprisingly vicious in melee, and when steel and muscle fails, the Catachan also have flamethrowers and big ass bombs. For the former point, the Catachan are known for being incredibly strong, many offworlders even calling them baby Ogren. And they're also debatably an abhuman species, or close to it at this point. The Catachan have been on their planet since before the Imperium even existed. And due to this, some argue that since the people of Catachan have lived on the planet for so long, they evolved to be naturally stronger and more resilient due to the Death World's deadly ecosystem and increased gravity. Whether or not that's true, it's undeniable that the guardsmen of Catachan are muscly freaks of nature. And that muscle gets put to good use as every Catachan is an expert in knife fighting. Catachan knives are legendary throughout the galaxy for being some of the best, if not the best, knives ever. So, give me a second to make like a Frank Reynolds in a recession and sell you these knives. They're made out of Catachan exclusive steel alloy, which is basically the only valuable material on the planet. The fine craftsmanship and special alloy makes the Catachan knives unusually sharp, and they hold their edge nearly indefinitely. It's a Catachan rite of passage to craft your first knife. As such, it's a close personal tool, and they're very rare weapons. Thanks to their legendary reputation and rarity, it's incredibly hard for offworlders to gain access to Catachan knives, so much so that some swindling road traders have been known to sell counterfeits. If you aren't convinced though, these knives are so good that even the orcs seek them out. Which, on that note, orcs actually pretty frequently respect, or at least imitate Catachan since they think the Catachan are just such fearsome warriors. And yes, this means that the literal race, purpose-built to be the perfect warriors by some lizard gods, think that the jungle fighters are such good warriors that said perfect warrior race wants to be more like them. A funny example of this is on Octarius, where one war boss had his gargants painted with green jungle stripes and a red bandana after fighting some Catachan. And in-game, these legendary badass knives and combat prowess epically translates to literally the same melee profile as any other basic human close combat weapon. Oh, sigh. Like, you get +1 a wound on a charge, which can be nice since you're always at least wounded on 5-ups, but damn. They also arguably have worse melee than any other guard infantry, cause at least the other guys can take power weapons and chain swords. But beyond their knife skills, the Catachan are also great marksmen, and they have a lot of snipers since they're already adept in surviving and hiding in concealed positions for an extended period of time. But their true favorite special weapons are flamers and demo charges, baby! Since their doctrine doesn't really synergize well with heavy weapons, flamers are a good portable alternative to bring some firepower to their infantry squads. It's also a good choice for their close combat specialization, and outside of combat, their flamers are good at clearing thick bush to make way for temporary camps or vehicle support. And if they ever need more fire for their firepower, many Catachan gunners favor the heavy flamers. But sometimes a flamer just doesn't have the punch needed to take down their prey. So they also heavily utilize demo charges and other explosives, both for their traps and grenadier assaults. And finally, for the weapons, the truest of Catachan mad lads, grab the heavy bolter and go a bit nuts. And although it might seem a bit crazy to use big ol' explosives in a confined space and flamers surrounded by very flammable trees and gases, the Catachan have nothing to fear since, and I quote, these weapons wouldn't dare harm a Catachan. Bad ass. Now, if only they could take plasma guns and get around that pesky hazardous rule with their sheer aura. Also, again, this is just a jab at their optionless game profile, nothing to do with lore. In lore, they do take plasmas. But then, moving on to the regimental structure, as far as guard regiments go, the Catachan are actually pretty unorganized and free-form. The most standardization that the Catachan have is their red bandanas that represent the blood oaths they made upon joining the guard, as well as representing looking really cool. And then they have their Catachan knives, of course. But beyond this, Catachan take whatever equipment that best suits them. But this doesn't mean that they're unable to work together well. Although Catachan generally disrespects authority, they do respect fellow badasses. And the Catachan officers are the best of the best. Catachan regiments are completely merit-based, and the guardsmen elect officers whom they believe deserves the authority. As such, they tend to dislike outsiders who come in and try to command them, namely generals from other regiments and especially commissars. Famously, the Catachan tend to frag commissars assigned to their units. But in some rare instances, commissars are actually able to earn their respect by demonstrating combat strength and respect for their culture. But this can also be a weakness for the regiment since, despite their grand feats and undeniable strength, the Catachan do have a reputation for being hard to work with. This, in conjunction with their distaste for authority and occasional drug addictions, means that they can sometimes be detrimental in multiple regiment operations. Another potential weakness for them is that they're pretty specialized for jungle fighting, obviously, and other hostile environments. Since they rarely utilize heavy armor and prefer guerrilla strikes, they'll have a pretty bad time on more open battlefields. However, this is mitigated by the fact that the regiment is incredibly adaptable and are great at learning new ways to take down whatever enemy they may face. Also, when they're in their element, they are absolutely unmatched. Some notable battles where they were in their element and wreaked havoc on their enemies was on the other famous worst planet ever, Armageddon, and on their very own homeworld. After the Second War for Armageddon and during the Third War for Armageddon, the Catachan were sent to fight orcs in the equatorial jungles of Armageddon, and along with the Armageddon orc hunters, they steamed some green ham. Then, famously, after the fall of Cadia, Catachan was assailed by Chaos Demon Legions, and although the initial surprise betrayal and attack inflicted some pretty heavy casualties, the Catachan, led by the coolest dude ever, Iron Hand Strachan, quickly turned the tide since they were much better at avoiding the perils of the jungle. The creatures of Catachan are equal opportunity killers and began to hunt literal demons, and despite relatively heavy corruption bolstered by the Great Rift's warp storms, the planet's wildlife essentially cleansed itself of chaos. Which, I know a lot of people cite this battle as a huge Catachan feat, but I still don't think people give enough credit for how crazy this is. Usually it takes planets centuries of hard work to be completely cleansed of chaos corruption, if ever. Meanwhile, on Catachan, some trees and creepy crawlies can just eat the force of hell and resume business as usual. Absolutely insane. But speaking of those little plants and creepy crawlies, I'll now go over some of my favorite of Catachan's evil-ass wildlife. Firstly is perhaps the most famous, that being the Catachan Devil. Essentially, it's just a giant evil centipede scorpion monster who may or may not have been descended from Tyranids severed from the hive. The Catachan Devils, which is the Stormtrooper equivalent and most elite Catachan unit, is also named after this ferocious beast. Which, by the way, Slime Marbo's a Catachan Devil, so these dudes are legit. So, essentially, Catachan Devils are named after Catachan Devils since they're so dang scary, except for the Catachan Devil Slime Marbo. In that instance, the Catachan Devil is far less scary than the Catachan Devil. Then, the next one is also a pretty popular one, the Catachan Barking Toad, and its little cousin, the Lesser Barking Toad. These are cute little frogs that, when threatened, violently explode into the most potent toxins in the entire galaxy, and it liquefies nearly all life in a kilometer radius. And then the lesser barking toads, liquefies nearly all life in somewhere less than a kilometer radius. Then, moving on, we have the Drake Bats, which are basically ogre-sized bats that swoop down from the trees to eat you. And also, speaking of Ogrins, since I don't know where else to put this, the Catachan love to work with Ogrins since they have the same values of loyalty, toughness, and determination. But finally, my favorite Catachan critter, solely because of an excerpt in Codex Catachan, we have the Heretic Ants, named as such because they eat your souls. Get it? Souls? 'Cause heretics go after your soul? They bite your feet and they kill you with some evil-ass neurotoxins. Just 3 bites is said to cause instant death. And these little bastards are actually more feared by the jungle fighters than bigger beasts like Catachan Devils, simply because they're harder to spot. But anyways, that's the Catachan Jungle Fighters. They're legitimately some of the most badass dudes in all of 40k. They're my second favorite regiment because they're one of the things in 40k that's still allowed to just be 100% unapologetically goofy and fun. It's also fun that they aren't burdened by their crappy world or have a grim demeanor like some other regiments might. These madmen legitimately love their home and are rarely down on themselves. They're literally an army of stereotypical action heroes who talk a big game and then kill some even bigger game. Like I said in my wolf video, they're the guard equivalent of the space wolves, and I say that in the best way possible. Every bit of their lore, they're hyped up so much that you start to think, well, these guys can't actually be that great. And then Harker crushes a Tyranid Ravener with his humongo bicep, and then Rambo blasts the rest of the horde with a heavy bolter. And that's not even the craziest Catachan feat. Which, also, I'm going to take a moment to exploit my platform a little bit and ask you kind viewers if anyone has a legit metal Sergeant Harker model. I can't find him anywhere, so if you have one and you're willing to part with it, please DM me on Discord and I'll buy him from you. Assuming it's not an insane price, that is. I really want him to complete my Metal Catachan Hero collection, so I'd appreciate any offers. But back to the conclusion. I really dig these guys, and my Catachan Force has been one of the most fun projects to work on. I'm one of the few people who actually unironically likes the Catachan Jungle Fighter models. I have like over 100 of the Jungle Fighters. Yes, I am insane. And despite my annoyance at them not having any options on tabletop, I always take at least one squad of Jungle Fighters, and just like in lore, these fellas are badass. My Jungle Fighters are probably tied with my Catachan for the biggest badasses in my list. Some of my Jungle Fighters feats include killing an Orc Beast Boss in a heroic melee charge, getting charged and attacked by Fulgrim himself turn 1, and then somehow surviving the entire game, General Flamer badassery, and then just getting a ton of points with their super nice scout move. So, what I initially thought to be the worst battle line datasheet has been super fun to play with, and it might just be the best one. It's hard to compete with Stickies, but ooh, that scout is just so nice. But anyways, that's about all for now. If you want more Catachan stuff, be sure to watch my old video on the Catachan Heroes. That one details a lot of the more insane-o Catachan feats. Or check out this really old video on guard inspirations. Thank you for watching, and thank you to all my awesome Patreons. You guys are all very epic. And as always, please like, comment, subscribe, and consider sharing to all your super awesome action hero guardsmen. Thanks. Honestly, the Catachan's greatest feat might just be that their models are still in production, considering how much people seem to hate them. GW did them super dirty with that web store paint job. Like, just look how much better they look in the codex with the more subtle paint job.